violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No.
Senator Jeff Merkley couldn't believe what he was hearing. When he asked FBI Director Kash Patel whether everyone in America is entitled to due process under the Constitution, Patel replied, "I'm not a constitutional scholar," triggering one of the most heated constitutional debates of the hearing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Director Patel. And so, as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us to, what are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission and am in support of the budget here, and I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay. Well, we've got those two options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today so that we can give it the appropriate consideration. Mm-hmm. Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the freedom clause of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution?
It
says all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no person.
It doesn't say that.
It does say no person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it because it's also been affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly on the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status, the Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected. Therefore, it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation, and you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No, you and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try to uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me close with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
Will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely. Send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Senator Murkowski.
One of the most striking exchanges of the hearing came when Senator Jeff Merkley challenged FBI Director Kash Patel over one of the most fundamental principles in American law, the constitutional guarantee of due process. The conversation began with a discussion about the FBI's budget. Merkley noted what he saw as conflicting requests from Patel. The director had previously suggested the FBI could use roughly $1 billion in additional funding to expand work on fentanyl trafficking, drug interdiction, and counterterrorism. Yet the administration's proposed budget called for reducing FBI funding by about $500 million. Patel responded that additional funding would allow the Bureau to do more, but he also supported the administration's proposed budget while continuing to work with Congress on funding priorities. The hearing then shifted dramatically to immigration enforcement and constitutional rights. Point 5. Merkley pointed to the Fifth Amendment, which states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. He emphasized that the Constitution uses the word person, arguing that its protections apply broadly, not only to U.S. citizens. He then referenced reports that hundreds of immigrants had been removed from the United States and sent to El Salvador without receiving due process. Merkley asked Patel whether those reports concerned him and whether the FBI should investigate potential constitutional violations. Patel declined to endorse Merkley's characterization of the situation. He said the FBI's role is to investigate criminal violations and arrest individuals who break the law, not to determine whether immigration removals complied with constitutional requirements. As Merkley continued pressing the issue, Patel stated that he was not a constitutional scholar and argued that determining whether due process had been violated was ultimately a constitutional question beyond the FBI director's role to decide. Instead, he said trained FBI personnel evaluate whether investigations should be opened based on potential criminal violations. Merkley strongly disagreed. He cited the text of the Fifth Amendment and argued that the Supreme Court has repeatedly recognized due process protections for all persons within the United States, regardless of citizenship status. He expressed concern that the nation's top FBI official appeared unwilling to affirm what he described as a basic constitutional principle. Patel pushed back by noting that he had previously served as a public defender and said he understood due process very well. He argued that Merkley was conflating criminal investigations with immigration removal proceedings and maintained that the FBI is not the agency responsible for carrying out deportations. The exchange became increasingly tense as Merkley argued that if another federal agency violated constitutional protections, the FBI should investigate potential violations of law. Patel responded that he investigates violations of law but did not agree with Merkley's legal conclusions regarding the specific immigration cases being discussed. As time expired, Merkley sought one final commitment. He asked Patel whether he would ensure that due process is fully respected in every action carried out by the FBI during his tenure as director. Patel answered simply, "Sure." Although neither side persuaded the other, the exchange underscored a broader national debate over immigration enforcement, constitutional protections, and the respective roles of federal agencies. Merkley argued that due process applies universally under the Constitution and should guide government action in every case. Patel maintained that the FBI's mission is to investigate criminal conduct within its legal authority and that broader constitutional disputes are ultimately resolved through the courts.